Right, so now we're going to talk about the two groupings of lymphatic structures. We have primary lymphatic structures. These are the structures that are involved in production and the maturation of your B and T lymphocytes. And then the secondary lymphatic structures are the structures where B and T lymphocytes are housed, and they can wait and activate an immune response. So your first of your primary lymphatic structures is red bone marrow. Red bone marrow is located in the spongy bone of, bone, okay? And it contains red bone marrow. So in adults, we have spongy bone in regions like the ends of our long bones, so typically the proximal ends of our long bones, and in regions like our sacrum, our coxal bones, some of our other flat bones. But as children, we have spongy bone with red bone marrow located at both the proximal and distal ends of our bones, as well as we have spongy bone, red bone marrow, and not spongy bone, I'm sorry, red bone marrow. I'm like crazy today. Even in our marrow cavities. So we have a lot more red bone marrow than we do yellow bone marrow in children. This here is yellow bone marrow. And so this is where all blood cells are born, is in the bone marrow. So both B and T lymphocytes are produced here, as well as all of our other blood cells. And so here's a picture that I want to show you. B lymphocytes are immune system cells that attach directly to a pathogen. So here are different pathogens. B cells are very specific. So they'll bind to one. They can't bind to all types of pathogens, but it binds to one, and then a helper T cell will co-activate it. And then this B cell is going to differentiate into a plasma cell or a memory cell. Memory cells remember forever until they die. So forever till they die. Whereas plasma cells produce these things called antibodies that are identical to the original receptor that bound to this pathogen. These antibodies will attach to the pathogen and inactivate that pathogen. They also cause the pathogen to be more likely to be eaten by macrophages. So that's what this is here. Whereas T lymphocytes are known as killer cells, and they also get co-activated by our memory cells, or not memory, I'm sorry. They get co-activated by our helper T cells, and when they get co-activated, they produce killer Ts and memory T cells. Memory T cells will remember the pathogen until they die. The killer Ts will kill cells that are infected with whatever pathogen they are specific to. They only kill whatever they are specific to. In this case, it's this virus, whatever that is, okay? The second main organ of the lymphatic system, or primary lymphatic organ, is the thymus. The thymus is where T lymphocytes get maturated. So they go there and they learn to be immunocompetent. So they can recognize self from non-self, and they only will attack self, or they only will attack non-self cells. So the thymus is the organ that helps in the maturation of T lymphocytes. This occurs typically during infancy and childhood. By puberty, the thymus has really outlived its worth, and so it starts to degenerate. And so here you see an adult thymus, very small, whereas an infant's thymus is going to be huge, covers the majority of that thoracic cavity, because it's still working very fast, trying to produce the immune system response needed. We have a lot of organs that function in housing lymphatic system cells and helping to provide a site for the lymphatic system to get activated. These can be broken into two groups. We call one group the lymphatic organs and the other the lymphatic nodules. It really depends on if they have a capsule surrounding the entire structure or not. If they have a capsule, then they're considered an organ. If they don't, then they're considered a nodule. So we'll talk about the organs first. The lymph nodes are one of the first organs. As lymphatic vessels bring fluid back to your right lymphatic trunk in your thoracic trunk, or I'm sorry, your right lymphatic duct in your thoracic duct, fluid goes through these lymph nodes, and any potential pathogens, any invaders that are in that fluid are going to get detected by these the B and T lymphocytes in the lymph nodes, and they're going to activate a response. So here we have all of these vessels moving into this lymph node. And then the lymph node is broken up into little sections. So we have this compartment, this compartment, this compartment. Each of these compartments has a region where we have B and T lymphocytes residing. So fluid moves in and goes around these little germinal center areas. And if any potential pathogens are there, they're going to activate B activity and T cell activity. And then this is what happens when your lymphatic nodes what is wrong with me? When your lymphatic nodes swell and you feel that swelling in your neck or in the axillary region, what's happening is you are actually having a response to that pathogen. And so you're getting a swelling because you have a lot of B and T lymphocytes that are starting to replicate, differentiate into the killer Ts and the plasma cells, and you're getting a response, an immune response. And this is what causes that swelling and the pain that's associated with feeling sick and having those swelled lymph nodes. And then the fluid runs back out through this one efferent vessel. The spleen is another large lymphatic organ. It's the largest of our lymphatic organs, and it is located in our abdominal cavity. It's located in that left hypochondriac region. So, well, you can't see it, but I'm touching my left hypochondriac region. There are two regions that the spleen is divided into, a red and a white pulp region. Here you can see the splenic artery, there's the spleen, and there's the splenic vein going into the spleen. The white pulp is where B and T lymphocytes as well as macrophages are going to reside mainly. The red pulp contains macrophages, erythrocytes, lots of erythrocytes. The red pulp has a lot of capillary networks associated with it. So blood is going to be filtered through the spleen, and our B and T lymphocytes are going to get activated if there's any pathogens in our blood. It's also the site where red blood cells that have been damaged, that are old, are going to be broken down so that we can release the hemoglobin and other materials to reform new erythrocytes. And so here's another figure of your spleen. Here's the spleen taken out. Here you can see the red pulp and the white pulp. I'm sorry. I do have a cold. So splenectomy is surgical removal of the spleen, and this is typically done because of severe injury to the abdominal cavity, or if you have certain forms of cancer that you have to remove the spleen. Without a spleen, you're going to be more prone to infections because the spleen is one of the primary sites that gets activated when you do have severe infections, especially blood infections. The next structures are going to be the lymphatic nodules. These are not complete organs, but they are still important because they still have areas where we have B and T lymphocytes. So you can see them right here. Here's an area where we would have B and T lymphocytes residing, and they're going to attack any potential pathogens. Tonsils are located in our throat. We have 3 sets of them. They have these little structures called crypts, which are good at trapping material. The problem is some of the material they trap is not normal. It's not potentially pathogenic. It can be food. There's a video here. I'll show you just a few seconds of it. Actually, it's a short video, so I guess I'll show you the whole thing. And so you can see there's the tonsillar crypt on the tonsil, and it's got a large structure in it. This could have been a piece of food that had gotten trapped, and as it sits there, it gets hardened by the calcium. Sorry, to move stuff around so I can get it. And this causes it to become very hard, and it becomes painful, and removal is not very hard to do, but it can be slightly painful to remove. So we have 3 types of tonsils. We have the pharyngeal tonsils here. These are also known as the adenoids when they are inflamed, especially. Palatine tonsils, so pharyngeal and palatine are the 2 that we typically have removed when we have our tonsils removed. And then we have the lingual tonsils, which typically do not get removed. And again, you can see the palatine here, the pharyngeal here, and the lingual here. Tonsillitis is another disorder associated with our tonsils. Typically, the palatine and pharyngeal tonsils are the ones that are going to get removed. If you have tonsillitis multiple times, I think 8 times within a year, then they will remove the tonsils. Usually, you're not going to get more infections because your tonsils were removed. We have a lot of protective mechanisms, so you'll still have the lingual tonsils. And we also have gastric juice, which is a primary defense against pathogens that will kill off many pathogens that get into our body through our oral route. And then we have mucosa-associated lymphatic tissue in our intestines that will trap any pathogens before it gets into our blood as well. Lymphatic nodules are similar to your tonsils, but they're found in other regions of the body. And they group together, forming clusters of this tissue, and it's known as MALT, mucosa-associated lymphatic tissue. And MALT can be found in our respiratory tract. It can be found in our GI tract. It's going to be found in areas that are going to protect us from having pathogens get into our system. One of the most important regions is in our intestines.